I got the President's Award, and it was I think it was like $1,000 bonus check. And I'm a numbers guy. They were making $500,000 profit a month where they had been losing that much. And I was like, wait a minute, this isn't right. I just made these guys a fortune. So that was when I was like, okay, I gotta go do this on my own.
From Escape Collective, this is Overnight Success, the podcast about the entrepreneurs, the personalities, and the passionate people who make up the sport of cycling and the stories behind the icons they've built. Most businesses in cycling we've talked to so far tend to have had a relatively straightforward journey, but Wahoo Fitness is not one of those who fit that mold. Chip Hawkins is the company's founder, and believe it or not, the Wahoo business started off in, well, you'll probably never guess it, boat docks. That's right, floating boat docks. But it was a good business with interesting problems that Chip loved to solve. Chip is an engineer, an entrepreneur, a tinkerer, and most importantly, someone who loves to throw himself neck deep into fixing problems to make something better. Chip's story is one that proves that if you see a problem and care enough to solve it for yourself and maybe a few friends, there's likely a market out there for a business to take shape. And as Chip points out, the most important thing is that you have to try.
Yeah, so I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, to young parents. My mom and dad were dating in high school, so I was actually a surprise, and ended up spending my early life in while my dad went to LSU, 4 years at LSU as a kid in a trailer park in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And then he went on to become a surgeon. So I was all through my young life, I traveled all over the place while he went to different schools, Memphis, Tennessee, and he did the GI Bill. So I was a couple years in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, an Army base. But he finally became an orthopedic surgeon when I was in the middle of 8th grade in U.S. junior high. And we moved to Ocean Springs, Mississippi, which is on the Gulf Coast. The Mississippi Gulf Coast, between Florida and New Orleans. So I say I'm from Ocean Springs, but the reality is I only lived there from 8th grade till 12th grade, and then I moved away for college, and I've never gone back. My family's still there.
But formative years, what were you like back then? Were you a tinkerer? Were you an engineer at heart your whole life at that point?
Oh yeah, I was
an entrepreneur.
Yeah, my mom always tells stories like I was taking things apart before I could walk, and then I think I was probably 5 or 6 when I learned how to actually put them back together. So she always laughs. She said I took apart a TV and put it all back together, and it would just rattle like crazy, and it didn't work anymore. But those were my first attempts.
And did you go right to university and study engineering?
I did. Yeah. Mechanical engineer, undergrad. So I was, I always said I was going to be an engineer. My nickname was MacGyver in high school. So I was always making some gadget or messing with something the whole lifetime. And
you went on to do a master's degree in engineering as well. I mean, that just says you were a numbers guy. You were really good at this. Was academia a profession you were pursuing at that point, or were you just wanting to further your education and had a special interest in it? Or
it's an interesting question. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I really wanted to go get an MBA, but that was really just to learn how to run a business and how to be a businessman, which was kind of the entrepreneurial thing. But I my personal love was engineering, so I ended up doing both. I went to Rice in Houston, and it's the craziest story. I signed up in the engineering school and got in, and then found out that they have a flat tuition, and so I signed up for the MBA program and did them both for the same cost. But
is that right?
They had an entrepreneurial MBA program that I was able to do.
Because I would have done the bare minimum, and I think a lot of other people would as well. You did the maximum.
Well, it was the same cost. It wasn't a cheap school. I mean, Rice is expensive private school in Houston, really good school. But yeah, when I found out it was a flat fee instead of by the hour, it was funny because in grad school for engineers, like 2 or 3 classes, they say 6 credit hours or 9 credit hours is considered a full load. And in the business school, it was more
Yeah.
like 15. And so I was taking 21 or 23, and the engineering
Oh man.
counselor was like, "Dude, you can't do this." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I can." And so it was pretty funny, but totally different worlds. The engineering school and in a master's program like that in the business school, but a lot of fun.
What a strong combination as a foundation to build on, Noah. What did you do after university? This probably would have been what, mid to late 90s you would have graduated from that?
Yeah, that was 93, I guess I graduated from there. I I went to work. My wife and I were I was already married, and my wife was wanting to get her MBA. So she kind of she kind of put me through school while she was working, and so then I got a job, and we were in Houston where Rice is, and so I went to work for a company called FMC, which is a huge manufacturing conglomerate. And I wanted to run a manufacturing business, and that was in the MBA program. I loved operations management and the kind of all the theory of constraints and operations inventory, and you read about all these case studies, and it's like I want to go do that. And so I found this manufacturing company and went to work for them right out of school. And it was interesting because I went to, as an MBA, you don't go in and run a plant. So I went into their mergers and acquisitions group
Yeah.
for an energy company that they did, God, it was a broad thing. They did the Bradley fighting vehicle, which is a military tank. And then they did oil field
Okay.
equipment. Wellheads is what they did in Houston, where I was. And then we did like pea harvesters, these huge farm machines. Just everything. The jetways that you get from the airplane to the building, that was Jetway. That was one of their companies. So all these companies were under the umbrella of this vice president I worked for, and we were looking at buying other
Right.
companies. And so I did that for a year, and then I wiggled my way into being a plant manager at one of the manufacturing facilities, which is what I really wanted to do.
That's a pretty successful trajectory for a young 20 something.
Yeah, it's that typical MBA story. You go into the company as an analyst, and then you get an opportunity to go prove yourself. And this was especially challenging because the oil field equipment had I want to say they had like 9 of these plants that made wellhead, valves around the world, and they all did exactly the same thing. Well, one of them just happened to be across the street from the headquarters of everything, and that was the one that I was supposed to run. And that's not an easy thing to do, to have, that you get so much more attention. If I had been in Caracas, Venezuela, where one of the plants was, no one from headquarters ever even visits. They just send the numbers in and you do your job. But here it was in the center of everyone's attention, which made it a better opportunity because ironically it was the worst performing plant they had, because I think so many people went in and out. But I spent about a year and a half, and it was just applied what I learned in MBA school, and found that it worked. They didn't have good on time delivery. They didn't have good, you know, pretty much everything was messed up, but it was by the book, and was able to implement a lot of things I learned, and had a ball doing it, and really got to love the guys that work there, and it turned into a really profitable success story for me. And I'll never forget, I got the President's Award, and it was I think it was like $1,000 bonus check, and I'm a numbers guy. They were making $500,000 profit a month, where they had been losing that much. I was like, wait a minute, this isn't right. I just made these guys a fortune. So that was when I was like, okay, I gotta go do this on my own. And as I said, my wife was getting her master's in business while I was going through this. And so when she graduated, I'm always talking about owning my own business my whole life. She's like, okay, well, this is your chance. I'm going to go get a job, and you're going to go start a business, be an entrepreneur. And And so she's a city girl. So it was going to be Denver, Colorado, Atlanta, Georgia, or DC. Those are the cities that she wanted to live in.
Okay.
So she interviewed and got a job in Atlanta, where we are now. Excuse me. And we moved here, and she wouldn't let me interview with anyone. It was, you're going to go you're going to go. And at the time I had just done this manufacturing turnaround. So I was going to buy a manufacturing business, and I was going to turn it around, and I was going to, make a fortune. Well, it turns out I didn't have enough money to buy a broken I needed a messed up manufacturing business, but I quickly found out that there are lots of messed up manufacturing businesses, but no one admits that they're messed up. So they were plenty messed up, but they were still way too expensive. And but I spent, 6 months here looking for, what am I going to do? And ultimately looked at probably 15 different businesses. And it wasn't that I was going to try to start something. I was trying to find something that was broken that I could turn around.
You've already done that and knew you could do that.
It's like I knew I could do it. I'd already proven to myself I could do it. I had all the confidence in the world.
Yeah.
But things got in the way. Mostly it was these businesses. I liken it to kind of real estate agents for businesses, these business brokers. They're selling these businesses, and they're saying how great they are and how wonderful they are. And they're blowing a lot of smoke most of the time. And so you'd have to spend a lot of time really learning what you were buying and figuring out whether it would really work and what the opportunities were. And, long story short, I ended up realizing that I couldn't afford any of the manufacturing businesses, whether or not they made me money, and started looking at other types of businesses. And I ended up with a sign repair business that basically fixed neon lights and parking lot lights in retail shopping centers. So grocery stores would have a big parking lot and big pole lights out front and a neon sign on the front. And I found a business that that had been purchased like only 9 months before and run into the ground is what had happened. So they had 9 of these bucket trucks that go up and down. You can go up and work in the air, big utility trucks, and 1 employee. And I ended up buying that and trying to rebuild it from nothing really.
And what was a lot of money to you at the time? Were we talking like a $50,000 business or a couple thousand or?
Yeah. So it's interesting. It was, I had saved my life savings was $25,000, and my grandfather loaned me $50,000. And so when I say I bought that business, it was in such bad shape that I signed a note, an SBA. I assumed an SBA loan for $700,000. But I didn't have to pay anything on it. And so I really bought the business without paying a penny, but I had to have working capital. So I had my life savings and a $50,000 loan from my grandfather. And that was what went in the bank to try to make a go of it.
Right. So this is a big business then, like not a small business, medium, I guess.
Yeah. They had about 12 employees, and they had these 9 trucks that all were owned by the company, and they had been really busy before it had been purchased by this previous guy. It's an interesting story. He came in with the intent as an absentee owner of buying this business, and he was going to franchise it because it was profitable. It was a really neat business. He thought, well, I'm just going to buy this. I'm going to take this model and I'm going to send it all over the country. And he had I think he had a wealthy family. And so he had a dry cleaning franchise in Pittsburgh or something. And he didn't even live in Atlanta. But he came in, and the craziest thing and I bought it. I bought it from him, but I really bought it from the previous owner because this guy had run it into the ground and everyone had left, and the previous owner was still owed money. So he was running it and trying to find someone to take it over. So the previous owners tell me the story of what happened the day this new owner comes in. He had 12 employees, and these are really nice, good guys, but these are kind of Georgia rednecks. They're in there, they're set in their ways. And he came in and said, I've bought this business now. If you had accrued vacation, take it up with Jeff. that's not me. And he handed out applications and said, you guys fill out these applications. We'll talk about, what you'll be paid and what we'll do with you going forward. And they walked. Every single employee, bar one,
Is that right?
walked out the door. But it wasn't like he ran them off. They weren't going to put up with that. So in the first day, he destroyed a highly successful business that had been around for 15 years. So he had one employee left, and so he hired a general manager to go hire a bunch of employees, and he went back to Indianapolis or wherever he was from, and it didn't work. Like, he didn't pay any bills. So I came in 9 months later, and the old owner was in there. The old owner was in there, and he had hired a couple of guys he talked into coming back and working for him. And they were trying to make a go of it, but they had gotten so far behind. It was a service business. So if the first letter of a Kroger grocery store goes out, it says Roger, they want you out there the next day, and they were months behind on everything. So it was bad, but that's what I bought, and it did have a lot of potential. But and I was naive. I thought, well, I'm just going to go visit all these customers and tell them, hey, I'm here, going to make everything good. And they had all found, they found new suppliers. That was the hardest part, is getting people to come back. There's a lot of hard things about that, finding good employees, because everyone had left, and then kind of earning the business back. And luckily I was a handy guy. So I literally spent the first 9 months or a year, all day I would go fix signs with the bucket truck. And then at night I would take a camera and take pictures of broken signs. And I was an introvert, I'm an engineer. So I'd make postcards of the broken sign, like the restaurant, and I'd send it, and I'd just mail it to them and say, hey, I can fix this for you. Do you want me to fix it? And with our phone number, and then wait for the phone to ring. And so that was how I drummed up business.
So you're the owner of this business. You're fixing signs. You're kind of doing sales as well, and kind of everything. How many employees did you have?
So there were two of us when I started. There was the one guy that knew what he was doing, and me, and I gradually hired. Once I got in there and owned it, he talked a couple of the other guys into coming back. But it took a while, and it took a while to get the business back, to get the customers to come back.
Yeah.
But I ended up doing that. It was successful, and it worked. And I think I had it for like 2.5 years, and had it back to, about where it was before it had been sold, before I got there. Had all the trucks running and a bunch of employees, and it was a great business in some respects. And all businesses are fascinating. They all have their good and their bad points. This one, from the good perspective, it had great margins, highly profitable. The bad side is it was a service business. So you have, electrician. You have to have, the employee has to be an electrician. They can't be scared of heights. They have to have a CDL, so they have to be able to drive a truck, and then they have to be able to deal with customers. And it's hard to find those guys, and you can't afford to pay them a whole lot, So that was the hardest thing, was finding people that could do it. And then you're sending trucks around Atlanta, which is the worst traffic, one of the worst traffic cities in the U.S. And so I got horror stories of, trucks breaking down, trucks catching on fire in front of I had a truck catch on fire in front of a grocery store on grand opening day. Like, the guy calls me and says, Chip, the truck's on fire. It's like, don't call me, call the fire department. It's out, So it was a great business in some respects, but not in a lot of ways. It was, the headaches were enormous with that. But so I did that for a couple of years, and actually had a guy just walk in off the street and want to buy it. And I said,
really?
Not yes, but hell yes. Cause the stress was crazy. and I didn't grow up dreaming of fixing signs. It's like, it was a job. It was a fun job, and it did well financially for me, but it was, it wasn't real satisfying to go to work every day. And so I ended up selling it just, a month or so later. I was out on the street looking for something to do again.
Wow.
And so I kind of went through the same exercise I had done the first time. I went and started calling these brokers and looking for businesses, and I grew up. I told you earlier, I grew up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So I grew up sailing, windsurfing, water skiing. Loved the water. one of the businesses I found was a company called Wahoo Boat Docks. And I saw it, and it was like, oh, that's my business. And it was a small business that had been bankrupt, that they had kind of pieced back together and put up for sale. And so that was an instant, like, oh, I got to check that out. And I went and looked at it and ended up buying it. And that was in '02, I guess, that I bought that. And it was the same thing. It was a company that had been quite successful, that had been pretty big. And they had kind of overextended themselves and gotten into financial trouble with a bunch of commercial projects and gone bankrupt. Chapter 7 bankrupt in the U.S. and the bank took everything. And so the owner had taken deposits for these residential boat docks. So when I say boat dock, it's like a garage for your boat on a lake, big lake. So ski boats.
I've looked at the website, and recently they're impressive boat docks. They're beautiful.
Really beautiful.
Big. Like that back then?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, okay. Well, we made them better over time, but yeah, they were big. 1,000 square foot structures, second floor, diving board. Really nice, not inexpensive, kind of like a little house on the water.
Yeah. I didn't think boat docks could be that until I saw that. Like, they're impressive. I encourage everyone to check it out.
Yeah, they could be awesome. We built some over the years that were amazing. We had PGA golfers in Texas for customers that were trying to outdo each other, some neighbors. And I think the biggest one we made was like 7,000 square feet and 4 stories. I don't know what that is in square meters. So you have to, it's big.
Well, that's a massive house for anybody.
A massive 4-story house. So his house overlooked a cliff, and we had a big bridge over the cliff to the 4th floor. And then you would walk down into like the bar area that was all air conditioned. And then you walk down again to where all the boats were kept. Fascinating, beautiful thing.
Now, was this also a problem that you saw needed fixing from a product and technical point of view, or just from a business point of view? Because it's clear you love to tinker, you love to make things better. How did you see this approaching it is a business and a product?
Well, it was, I kind of skipped the whole, why did I do it part there. So the business had been building these small residential docks, but the primary business was doing commercial marinas. So they would go do a whole bunch of slips for a whole bunch of boats for marinas. But what I saw when I went and looked at it was this really ingenious design for an aluminum structure that floated. And it was done well. The original owner did a really good job with it. But when I saw that, what he had done is he built them in North Georgia on one lake, and he went to he'd go to people's houses and he'd talk to them about them and he'd sell them. And what I saw is the opportunity to, not franchise it, but basically manufacture those docks and find people to sell them for me. And so we built a dealer network. Right. Where we would build it in a factory and send it to wherever someone wanted to install it. And that was kind of the business idea. And that was from the very first day I talked to him. I was like, well, this is what I don't want to go be a dock installer, but I could build a really cool structural dock and make this into a really good business, because there were no national big dock builders. Basically, if you wanted to get this kind of dock, you would call the local dock builder or lumber yard. There's usually somebody that on the side would do this kind of stuff, but they weren't professional.
And you had enough of fixing signs. You didn't want to do that stuff anymore, eh? You wanted to build the network.
Yeah, I get to build the docks, which was what I did, and I actually found a partner in that business that wanted to go do the sales part, and so I was able to focus on, designing the docks, strategy and that sort of thing. And like my master's in engineering was in structural dynamics. So if there's anything that has dynamic structures, it's a dock that's floating on rough water, made out of metal. So that was, I got to use all my
Yeah, wow.
engineering at the same time.
And the Wahoo, I remember seeing, I think it was probably 2012 at Interbike, the first time I ever saw this Wahoo trainer. Where did this come from? The first thing I thought of was a fish, because there's a
Yeah.
Wahoo fish. What was the name at that point? Was it the Wahoo River? Was it the Wahoo fish? Where did that come from at the time?
So it was Wahoo Creek is where,
Creek.
yeah, Wahoo Creek is a tributary of Lake Lanier in North Georgia. And that's where this guy started the business. He lived on Wahoo Creek, and he built them in his garage or in his barn behind the house. And so he named it Wahoo Boat Docks. And yeah, when I bought it, I was like, I'm going to keep that name. I loved it. We didn't build them on Wahoo Creek anymore. We had moved to, the big city of Gainesville, but we were close to the lake still. But yeah, that was the origin of Wahoo, the Wahoo Fitness, where Wahoo Fitness eventually came from. But yeah, Wahoo Creek in North Georgia.
Wow. And at this time, were you a fitness enthusiast of any sort, or how did that come as to be part of your life?
So it's an interesting story. I was fitness for the sake of fitness, never. I mountain biked with my wife some and friends some. Growing up, it was windsurfing, water skiing, but never, go out and do a triathlon or go out and, go jogging or anything like that. It was just, I played tennis, but I was, getting mid 30s and getting a little heavier every year. And it's funny, I had a kind of aha experience with a duathlon. My wife challenged me to go do a duathlon with her. We were at a party with some neighbors. And so I think 8 of us went to do this duathlon in Callaway Gardens in South Georgia. And it was a dare for me because everyone there did that kind of thing. They rode bikes a lot or they jogged, and I didn't do any of it, but I was like, I can do that. And so I didn't train at all. I just went down there. I had a mountain bike. And, so this was a 5K run, a 20-mile road bike, and then a 5K run to finish. And I did the 5K run without walking, which is the furthest I'd ever run in my life. And I got on the mountain bike. I had a mountain bike, but it was a road course. So I got on my mountain bike and I did the 20 miles barely. I mean, I've got memories of that. They'll never leave me. Going up a hill, being passed by people that did not look like they should be passing me. Just feeling awful. And I finished the 20 miles, and I'm supposed to do another 5K, and I literally couldn't pull myself off the bike. I just peeled myself off the bike and sat down and wanted to cry. Like I couldn't run again. And so I was done. I didn't finish the race. First ever duathlon, and I didn't finish. My neighbor was one of the neighbors that went with us was 71 years old, and he finished next to last, not last, but he's telling stories at dinner about how I didn't finish last, and I'm like, well, yeah, because I was behind you too. I didn't even finish at all. But that was I kind of came away from that day thinking, you know what, I probably shouldn't be in such a physical condition that I can't do something like this. And that it was really life changing. I mean, I started exercising. Wow. I signed up for a boot camp, and I don't know if you've seen boot camps, but this is where you do like a little PT test at the beginning, push-ups and sit-ups, and you run a mile. And the first day you run a mile, and I was like a 10-minute mile, and then at the end of 30 days you do it again, and I think I got down to like an 8.5-minute mile, and it was like, I was hooked. So I did that like 3 months in a row.
But this was no longer exercise, I guess, for you, was it? It was competition. It was I guess the byproduct was exercise, but
it's totally it. The boot camp, it was that stupid PT test. It was competing with myself, but yeah, there was a guy that ran a 6-minute mile. He was the fastest one there. And I remember thinking, damn, if I could ever do that, that was incredible. And I don't think when I was doing boot camp, I ever got to the 6-minute pace. But interestingly, during that, I met a girl who had just done an Ironman. She was in the boot camp with me. And she's like, no, you should do a triathlon. And it's like, well, that sounds like fun. So I signed up for a triathlon after
Yeah.
doing like 3 months of boot camp. And that was a blast. I did it on my mountain bike again.
Right. You
And
finished?
I finished, yeah. And at that point I was like, I'm actually could maybe be competitive. And I met a guy, Martin Balg is his name, on the run. I'm doing a 5K run at the end of this little sprint triathlon, and this guy in front of me, he's ahead of me on the run, stops running and picks a turtle up out of the road and walks it over and puts it in the woods. And I caught him because he was saving a turtle, and started talking to him. But it turns out he was part of Dunwoody Cycling, and he was this, he ran like a cycling club, which was real close to my house. And he said, no, you should come out and ride with us. And I had never done road biking at all. And so before I went out, I got like a Schwinn Airdyne and started, or a Schwinn recumbent, and started, trying to work out and doing the
recumbent, like one of the ones you sat down in, or the Airdynes that the CrossFitters use that the arms go on the legs?
It was the cheap sit down. It was the, you sit.
Right.
You sit back and you could watch TV and pedal, but it had like you cranked on it for a while and the lights would come on and you could do like a 40-minute program. And so I did that for several weeks before I got up the courage to go out and try to ride with these guys, because they rode in the mornings at 5:30. And so I did. I went out and I had been riding that Schwinn recumbent hard enough that I was actually decently fast by the time I went out and rode with them. And that was, that completely hooked me. The first time I went out, it was a funny story. They did this 6-mile loop that's really what created Wahoo Fitness. But the 6-mile loop, the first day, they would do like 4 or 5 loops on Tuesday mornings. And I happened to go out on a Tuesday morning, and I didn't know the course. And so I'm riding with these guys in the dark, scared to death. And I had lights, but I didn't have very bright lights. And we're climbing this hill, and they're just walking away from me. And I'm like, I'm never going to get home. And the funny thing is, it was a triangle. We never got very far from the car, but I had no idea where I was. And so I gave it everything I had to stay with them so I didn't get lost. And I hung with them. And at the end, they were laughing because they were trying to drop me, and I didn't let them drop me. But I ended up doing that 4 days a week with those guys for years. And we would do the Tuesday loops would be like time trial mode after I started riding, got used to it. And I'm such a numbers guy. I had at this point, I was getting really into it. I went back and did the duathlon the next year and got like 5th place overall. And I bought a power tap. So I had a power meter on my bike. I had a Garmin GPS, and this is like 2007, 2008. So power tap was all there was. But I bought them because I wanted to track whether I was getting better, and I would time these 6-mile laps, and I would put them in a spreadsheet, and I'd publish them to a web page, and it would have lap time. It was my average power. Why they cared, I don't know, but nobody else had a power meter. So I would post this, and we would kill ourselves trying to better those times every week. And before long, before I would even get to work, which was still in Gainesville in the dock business, the guys would all be emailing me like, where's the numbers? How'd we do today? Because there was no Strava or any of that stuff. And so I would spend an hour every Tuesday tabulating all these numbers, and Power Tap and the Garmin didn't talk to each other. So you didn't get like power data with your GPS data. So I had Excel macros that I wrote that would collate these together. And so I could actually see what power I did, where I was. And that's when
even at that time, from memory, Garmin's were only hitting the mainstream. Like the little 510s, I think were, they were still rare.
Yeah, this was 305. So it was like first gen. I think they had a 301. So second gen ever Garmin. Yeah.
Big.
It was big. It talked to a heart rate monitor, but that was about it. And then, like the power meters didn't have wireless yet, so it was really just cadence, heart rate.
And that was the Garmin standard Ant Plus, right? Who owned that protocol?
Yeah, well, at the time they didn't own it. It was a separate business, Ant Plus. So
Okay.
they were Dynastream out of Canada. They were working with Nike and doing the little shoe pods.
Yeah, right.
So
That's where
yeah,
I'm from.
oh yeah,
Little just outside of Calgary. Yes.
okay, yeah. That is the technology that ultimately I discovered trying to figure out how to save myself the time of tabulating all that data. So this was right around the time the
Right.
iPhones were out, and I had an iPhone, and I'm doing these laps, and I'm thinking if I could just get all this data in my iPhone, then I it could automatically, the app could automatically put it on a website, and this could be 100% automatic. So I was kind of dreaming of Strava before it existed, and creating everything.
Yeah.
Uh, and so the challenge to doing that was that there was no way to get this data from any device into an iPhone. And that led to me finding Ant Plus and ultimately building this little 30-pin Ant key that would plug in the bottom of the iPhone and let you connect
Okay.
heart rate monitors and then power meters. Eventually, Quark came out with a power meter that would talk
Yep.
Ant Plus. So that was what I was figuring all this out. This is while I'm still working at the dock business, but I
Uh-huh.
but trying to figure out, well, this would be cool. And so I start tinkering, and I'll never forget, I going into to my business partner, the dock business, and saying, Tim, I think I'm gonna start this business. And I had been screwing around with it for a couple of months and figuring things out, but I had decided I needed to go to Canada to this Ant conference, where they talked about Ant Plus,
Okay.
and it was like a $1,200 plane ticket. It was like, so I'm going to spend $1,200 and take a week and go to Canada. And he was like, well, what are you talking about? We built boat docks in
This has
North
nothing to do with
Georgia.
docks.
This has nothing to do with docks. And it was actually good timing, because it was the real estate kind of crunch in the U.S. where real estate had crashed, and so we were doing fine financially, but we had been growing, doubling every year from the time I started it. We just were, it was highly successful, doing great. We weren't growing
Yeah. Okay.
because there just weren't a whole lot of houses being built, and so
We're
I had
coming up on 2008-ish, eh?
yeah, around
Yeah.
2008. And so I had a lot of time on my hands because the business wasn't growing. There really wasn't anything I could do as macroeconomic. And I had guys in the business that had time on their hands. And so my little hobby turned into,
Mm.
the way to keep us busy. And that was how we ended up building the Ant Key. Um, and, and, and ultimately getting it licensed through Apple, and starting to sell it online, and all this was done at Wahoo Boat Docks, like as part of the dock business.
So you started tinkering. You made an Ant Plus dongle that plugged into the iPhone, and so there's no Bluetooth LE at that time, the Bluetooth Low Energy. And what did you do with this data once it was on the iPhone? Did you create an app, or did you just look at it, or?
Yeah, so I started working on an app. I had a guy in the Wahoo Docks that was writing an app, and as but I'm also like looking around and seeing what other people are doing, and there was a huge push, or a huge push to use the iPhone running. They had the headsets and you could listen to music. They had GPS built in, so tons of people were using them for running. And it turns out the number one request when I'd go on these sites like Map My Run or Runkeeper, big apps with hundreds of thousands of users, the number one thing on their customer support request was always heart rate data. And lo and behold,
Right.
the Ant Key enabled a heart rate monitor to talk to the iPhone. And so that was where most of our sales went. I mean, I was doing it for cycling, but it was really those were our first customers.
How did you sell these dongles, and how did you get the word out there that this exists now?
Well, through a lot of ways. One, it's interesting. Ray Maker was one of the guys I reached out to. He was just starting a blog.
Yeah,
he was
okay.
in DC, I think he had done 2 or 3. Like the Garmin 305 was the only GPS out there. And so I got to know Ray, and he's like, yeah, I think other people would love this thing. I think it's a good idea, because I was basically trying to validate whether I should pull the trigger to buy the parts to make like 1,000 of these things, because you can't really make one electronic device, the tooling and all that stuff. So as I was going through, I was like, well, I gotta make 1,000, and I'm trying to figure out, if I make 1,000, will I ever sell them? Is this going to take me 6 years to sell, or am I going to sell them in a month? And so ultimately I was reaching out to people. I reached out to Robin Thurston at Map My Run, and he was one of the first ones who was like, yeah, we'll buy them. And he didn't want to send his customers to us. He just wanted to buy them and sell them themselves. And so pretty much everywhere I went to these apps, they would say absolutely, because they knew their customers wanted it. And so those first 1,000 sold within like probably 30 days from when we finished them.
Wow.
To all different people for all different reasons. So it was kind of an instant success.
And would Apple play ball with you to sell them on their site, or could you have a commercial relationship with them in any way that was beneficial to both of you? Or
well, we had to go through a huge exercise to get the dongle made in the first place. It has to be licensed from Apple, the Made for iPod program. They called it MFI. And so that was probably the hardest thing, not the electronics and the software to make it work. It was getting Apple's approval to do it. So they did bless it. But they didn't see it as something that they would sell. I remember going out and trying to sell it to them a few times, and basically the story was, it looks like we forgot something. We're not going to sell a dongle that plugs in the bottom of a phone that makes the phone look bad, and it looks like we forgot something. So they weren't helpful when it came to selling the ANT key for us, but they gave us a path to sell it, on our own by selling so many iPhones to the world.
Right. You just kept on selling these ANT keys and thinking, wow, there's a business here. Or how did that progress from there to, you creating Wahoo Fitness?
So they sold extremely well. One thing that I didn't think of when I was doing it, because I already had a heart rate monitor and a speed and cadence sensor and a power meter, but most people that were looking for heart rate didn't already have a heart rate monitor, an ANT plus heart rate monitor. So quickly I realized, I need to make all these other sensors as well. And so we ended up selling more of the dongles with a heart rate monitor in the box, or the dongle with a speed and cadence sensor in the box, than just the dongle. And so that, that's twice as much revenue as just the dongle. So we ended up selling, starting to build out a whole range of products to go with it. It was probably only about a year in or 9 months in when I was like, well, this is a real business. It's like real sales, lots of business. And I also had it didn't take long to realize it didn't fit well with the dock business. The average price was like $79. And I think the average price of the docks is like $29,000. The guys in the dock business were fully capable of helping me build it and get there, but it just didn't fit from a transactional perspective. And so I kind of had a aha moment again and said, Tim, my partner, like, we shook hands and said, you stay here and run this dock business. I'm going to go build this fitness business and see what I can do with it.
This podcast is fully funded by our members at Escape Collective. In fact, all of our content on our website and our podcast network is 100% supported by our members, who believe that cycling media should be independent from the sport and industry we cover, and that we should exist to serve you, rather than live or die by our ability to be a platform for the sole purpose of selling you more stuff. If you enjoy this podcast or any of our other work and believe in our mission of independence, please go to escapecollective.com/join and become a member today. Thank you for your support. you split off and then and started Wahoo Fitness, and then the whole Bluetooth Low Energy was a protocol that became popular. And for listeners, Bluetooth at that point was it wasn't really meant for like heart rate data, and it was an old just file transfer and pretty clunky thing, and it was very power hungry. How did you get from Ant Plus dongles to now all of a sudden being able to have heart rate monitors talk to the iPhone and be first to that? Because that's pretty significant, I imagine.
Yeah, so that this Bluetooth Low Energy technology was actually hinted at and in the works for many years. And so even when the first year I went with the Ant Plus conference, that was always the thing they didn't talk about was Bluetooth Low Energy. We're doing Ant Plus. You need to adopt this and use this. But Bluetooth Low Energy was essentially the original Bluetooth was meant for file transfer and audio headphones. So it couldn't do the heart rate data. The difference was that Bluetooth Low Energy allowed you to have very low power, so you could use a non-rechargeable battery like a coin cell battery. And so it was always out there, and we knew it existed. But and the threat to us was, when is it going to get stuck in things like iPhones? Because Apple's already told us they're not going to sell our product because it looks like they forgot something. Well, they're not going to put Ant Plus. Well, there were two things they could do. They could put Ant Plus in the iPhone and make it work with all the things that Garmin has, or they could put the standard Bluetooth Low Energy in the iPhone. And so the Ant Plus guys are always saying, well, they're going to put the Ant Plus in the iPhone. Don't worry. And ultimately they didn't. They put Bluetooth Low Energy in, but it's a hilarious story. We had gotten to know the guys at Apple really well, and the head of the MFI program called me, and he said there's a technology there's a product we recently introduced that has a technology that I think you'd be really interested in. You should take a look at it. And that was it. Cryptic. There's a product we just released, and that has technology you might be interested in. So it's like, I have no idea what he's talking about. So I go on Apple's website and I'm looking, it's like, what they had just launched the MacBook Air for the first time. And it didn't say anything special about it. It didn't say anything about Bluetooth or anything. So I went and bought one. I gave it to my software engineer, Michael, and said, Michael, tell me, what's in this. And we found that it had Bluetooth. And they had the entire core Bluetooth stack, which is what Apple uses to talk to Bluetooth Low Energy, completely undocumented. So we kind of reverse engineered all the documentation out of their code and figured out how to communicate with it. And the same company that we bought all our chips from that did the Ant Plus chips was also working on prototypes of the Bluetooth chips. So I'm calling them saying, hey, I need Bluetooth chips. We gotta get our devices updated to try to make a Bluetooth one. And so we did. We went as fast as we could, put the Bluetooth Low Energy chips in a heart rate monitor that ultimately called the Blue HR. And this was, I'm gonna say, like May, June timeframe. And every year the iPhone comes out around September. And so we're thinking, okay, they're going to come with an iPhone. It's going to have Bluetooth Low Energy in it. And that was kind of the clue they gave. And so we went off, and
big bet though, big gamble, hey?
Yeah. So I bought all of actually they were engineering samples at the time of the Nordic Bluetooth chips that they had because they weren't on the market yet. And so they told me they're not going to be.
Those are the small chipsets you put into the heart rate monitor to talk to the MacBook Air.
Yeah, it's like the chip that goes on the board. That they're telling me they're not going to be available till next year. Right. And it's like, well, you just sent me 10 of them. You got to have them. And they're like, well, those are engineering samples. It's like, I don't care. I'll take them. How many do you have? And they're like, oh, we got like 10,000. I'll take them. So we bought all of the engineering samples because they're like, well, they're engineering samples. You can't use them in a product. It's like, well, they work. It's like, are they going to not work after they've been working? Yeah. They're like, no. If they work for your purpose, they're not going to break over time. So so we did. We totally went out on a limb and bought them all, and finished the design and got it ready, and all sat around, watching the iPhone announcement when they did it, and they didn't say anything. They didn't say anything about Bluetooth. but they put a little table on the screen and it had Bluetooth Low Energy up there. We're like, yes, and so it worked, and we launched the Blue HR heart rate monitor like a week after the iPhone launched, and that was game changing because all of our customers switched over immediately. No one else had it. We were the only one in the market. Apple took it, put it in. All their stores globally had the Blue HR, and then we quickly made a speed and cadence sensor. So we had both of them in the stores. And yeah, it was awesome. So we could have been an existential threat. It could have put us out of business if we hadn't built it, because the Ant Key, well, as scary as it seemed that the Ant Key would go away, it really didn't. We just finally quit selling it like a year ago, which is like 5 years after they quit making any phones with 30-pin connectors. But yeah, that's
it's interesting because that is it's a competitor, Garmin, now, who owns that technology, correct? So it's a funny space to play in, that, connecting a Garmin through Ant keys, and also the selling your own competing units, isn't it?
Oh yeah. It was always, and the first couple of years it was Dynastream, and then they got bought by Garmin, and they did a good job. Garmin did a good job of leaving them separate because they're an industry standard. They're supposed to be impartial and not help one or another. And so there's lots of stories around that as well. But they've done a generally good job, and all the guys in Canada are trying to be standard, but they're ultimately owned by Garmin. So Garmin's going to use a little leverage here and there. Can hardly blame them.
Yeah. Wow. So before I cut you off, I mean, I'm glad we went into that, because that's fascinating. You were going into the CompuTrainer.
Yeah.
And
so with the CompuTrainer, I had about the same time I started training for the triathlons. I was trying to figure out how to get faster on a bike, and so I wanted to do that course at Callaway Gardens where I did the duathlon. I wanted to ride that course in my house and to train for it. It's got a bunch of hills. Like, I can't just go out and ride around here. I need to I want to practice the exact course. And so I found the CompuTrainer, which had this course creator, and it was adjustable resistance. And so you theoretically could do just that. You would just load in a course and you could ride it, and the power would change. And so I bought it. It was like $1,800. And I mean, it sucked. Everything about it. The software was awful. People love them, but they were not that good. I hated the way that I hated the drag. So you put your wheel on, and you put the roller up against the wheel, and the drag just made it so unnatural. And so that's, and immediately I'm thinking of ways to make a better trainer. And really the software that went along with it was so bad that I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking about how that should work versus how it does work. And so I was, from way back then, before I even started the Ant Key, I already had the CompuTrainer, and I was already waking up and kind of sketching what a kicker would look like, what ultimately turned into the kicker. And it wasn't until several years later, like I'm in Atlanta in our office here, selling heart rate monitors and Ant Keys, and thinking, I'm actually, because, I don't have to just dream about this. I'm in this business now. I can make this trainer. And so that's what we did. I said, let's work on it. And so ultimately started working on the kicker and launched the kicker. And it took a lot of time and a lot of work. And again, it was, it's a lot different than a boat dock, but it's also a lot different than a one piece of, electronic PCBA, little board and a heart rate monitor is a lot different than a kicker. But the kicker is right up my alley. Like, it's, motion and flywheels and belts, and then, perfect mechanical engineering toy. So it was a blast.
There's also a fundamental difference between, $100 heart rate monitors and Ant keys and small electronics, and that can be easily shipped in a small package, and then, 100-pound or whatever, 50-pound kickers, the logistics required to run that business. Were you going off gut feel and winging it, or did you have a business case and business plan that said there's a market here? How did you approach that area of the business?
It's funny. I I knew that there was a market because I wanted it so bad myself. Same way with the ant key and the heart
Yeah.
rate monitor. I knew it. Ultimately, what surprised me was I looked at what trainers were out there, and they were, the very best that you would buy. The CompuTrainer was such an outlier. It was $1,700, $1,800. So there's nobody else that had anything like that. They're all dumb, what we call
Yeah.
dumb trainers now. And I think the most expensive
Yeah.
ones were like $350. And so I was looking at that thinking, okay, I can sell one for twice that much because I'm going to put all this cool stuff in it. So I'll make a $700. If I can make this for $700, the world's my oyster. Everybody's going to have it. And so, fast forward a year into building it and working on it, it's like, I'm not going to be able to sell this thing for $700. So we ultimately got it finished and built, and I had it at $1,200. And I didn't think that we'd sell. I knew we'd sell them, but I thought at $1,200, it was cheaper than a CompuTrainer, which I knew was, a piece of crap. But it was just too much to be mainstream in my mind. It's people aren't going to pay that much for a trainer. But they did. It was an instant success. We
Wow.
From Interbike, we announced it at Interbike in Vegas. I think 2012 or 2013. And
Okay.
it was like we stole the show. Everybody wanted one. Everybody was talking about it, and that was so much fun.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that one of the big parts that made up the success of it was you decided to create an open, platform for software to be developed on it. What was the rationale behind that decision? Because it was a stroke of brilliance, and you didn't come from a software background and possibly familiar with these models.
Yeah, there were several things driving that. As I talked about with the Ant Key, we had built this API that we gave to all these different apps that allowed them to talk to our hardware. So Runkeeper, MapMyFitness, Strava, anybody that wanted to work with our hardware would do it. And that openness is what drove us to have all the success. We had an app. We gave it away, and probably 5% of the users actually used it. It was never that, and we still have it. It's our Wahoo app today. But it was the ability for other people to write software that was so brilliant. And I always wanted to write software for the CompuTrainer. I tried for years to get those guys to let me. I was trying to make a dongle that you could plug in the CompuTrainer that would have an Ant Plus radio, so that other people could write software for it. Yeah. Myself included, with our, because I just wanted to be able to do the course creator. They absolutely refused. Said it wasn't fast enough. It was way too high tech. So ultimately, I had to make the kicker to be able to accomplish it. But yeah, that's just so natural. No one can make the perfect software themselves, and everyone has a different. I wanted to go practice at the time. I wanted to go practice that course. That was what I wanted to do. But other people wanted to play. Zwift has come about now. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff that people want to do with it, and people always want to evolve. So it's just the natural way to do it. Locking it down is you can never make enough. Make the software yourself that's going to satisfy everybody.
At any point in the Wahoo Fitness journey up until this point, did you take on investment from family and friends or bank loans to be able to build, or were you growing on retained profits, or how did you find that part of the business?
So the initial kind of starting capital came from the dock business. So it was, it wasn't that much money that we spent. I had, I kind of stole employees that were already working in the dock business. So it was kind of nights and weekends that we were working on it. I gave them some equity. I said, hey, if you'll stay around at night and help me finish this thing, I'll give you a stake in this new company. So that got it off the ground, but it grew so fast that we did need capital. I was selling the Ant keys quicker than I could buy them, as fast as I could make them. And I would need to go, order $500,000 worth of parts, and I didn't have $500,000 to order. So I went, I went to the bank, and I had a good relationship with the bank because dock business was fairly sizable and successful. And, they said, all we need is 2 years of tax returns. It's like, well, I've only been at this for 6 months. I don't have 2 years of tax returns to give you. And so ultimately the banks wouldn't loan anything, even though it was profitable from the start, because we built these keys with all the employees that already worked for me that were already covered by the dock business. But so I did. We had to go when I first moved to Atlanta and we opened that office. We raised, I think we had ended up raising $900,000 from friends and family.
Right.
And my son's grandfather was the prime. Most of the money was from him. He had just retired and was looking for things to do, and I met him at Starbucks and told him the story, and he said, "Yeah, I'd love to help." And he's still on our board and been a fantastic part of the story as we've grown. But so that was our kind of kickoff capital, because we needed to buy inventory. It wasn't like we were just going to hire a bunch of people. It was just working capital is what we needed. And over the years we've done that a couple other times, because we like our growth story has been pretty amazing. We've grown. I don't know what the annualized rate is, but it's pretty phenomenal from kind of a startup in 2010 to where we are now.
Yeah. And so with the element, you kind of went outdoor. You were quite an indoor brand, I think, at least the way I knew you in those early days at the Kicker. What was the strategy and the thought process behind going outdoor with a computer to take on the almighty Garmin? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny because I was the my friends called me the Fred of the group. I was perfectly happy putting my iPhone on my handlebars with my Wahoo app, and and pulling people along. So I was fine with but yeah, over the years I just I came to the realization that people did not want to put iPhones on their handlebars. That was what I wanted at first. That's why it's a lot of the reason the Ant Key existed was, we built a waterproof case with an Ant Key built in for your phone that was indestructible. So you could put it on there in the rain. So I was always trying to push people to put their phones on their handlebars. And the element was me finally giving in and saying, okay, people aren't going to accept this, but I hated Garmin's. Like, I had used them before I started using my phone. I did not like the software interface. I mean, their hardware is nice, but the software was just horrible to use and clunky, and I thought we could do better. And so Ben and some of the guys they're working with me were like, yeah, we can do, we can't use an iPhone because people don't want to put their iPhone on their bars, but we can make a better computer than what's out there. And we said, yeah, let's do it. And so we spent a few years and a lot of time to get it done, but we ultimately built a really good bike computer.
Was it more difficult than you expected, or was it as straightforward as you thought it would be going into it, or how did that go?
It was. I probably always underestimate it. I look at a problem and say, "Oh yeah, that's an easy thing to do." So it was. I think I had the right ballpark of how hard it would be, but it's always the last 10%. You can get 80-90% of it done, but getting that last 10% and getting all the little nuances right, because it has to work. It has to work well. People have to be really excited about it, or it's not going to be a success. So it was quite an undertaking, but it was worth it. It's been fantastic. And I love, with the Kickers, you can never see. I never saw anybody with them, but with the Elements now, I see people everywhere. The Elements and Bolts and Roams, and it's really fun to be able to see people ride. Hey, that's, I made that. I love it.
And that group that you used to ride 4 times a week with around that triangle, are they now doing their mornings on a Kicker, or you still ride with them?
It's funny. They do. Yeah. But they also still ride. I've been running more. I need to get out and start riding. I've been running the last few years. I've been hooked on running. But yeah, they're still out there. I still ride with them. And a lot of the local groups have been, it's funny. One of the groups used to be just hardcore. They would go out, if it was actively raining, they might call it off, but didn't matter how cold it was, wet roads, they were out there, and they've slowly all gotten Kickers, and now they all get on Zwift. They all get on their Kickers, and and they have discourse servers, so they have like a chat server.
Yeah.
And it's funny because a couple of the guys are like, one of them's my kid's pediatrician, and he's always like, yeah, you ruined it for us. Like, it used to be if it was below freezing, and now if it's like below 68 degrees, like any excuse, and they're on their stickers instead of going outside. So.
Well, Chip, I moved all the way from Australia, or from Canada to Australia, to basically never to ride indoors again. So I have you to blame that I'm out there every morning in my shed filled with spider webs, and often prefer that to getting outside. So yes, but I think it's also a great thing. Now I'm curious. From what I understand, looking at your website, and that in 2018 you sold a part of the company to, what is it, Norwest Equity Partners, so a private equity firm, and it, you don't actively run the business, from what I understand. You're chief engineer, and that, do those two coincide? Of you no longer have to run the business, you can hire people better than you, or what is the thought process behind that, and how does that intersect with private equity coming in?
They're sort of unrelated, but I guess related in some ways. I mean, I've always been a jack of all trades, so I kind of know what to do about how to run a business. I've got a good sense of it, but especially as we grew, I like the skills you need to run a big organization with departments are different than the entrepreneurial skills to start a business or run a small business where you kind of get to make all the decisions. And so I've always believed in, focusing on what I'm good at and finding and hiring people to do the other stuff. And in the dock business,
Right.
that was Tim. I basically built the business, the operations, made the docks, figured out all the logistics. Tim found dealers and did all the marketing side. So very much the same way. We hired marketing people, and as it's grown, it's been less and less of my comfort zone. But we continue to have more and more products, and so the ability to focus on the product side of the business and build what we're doing next takes up more than all of my time. And so we have hired and had awesome people join us, and some of those have just naturally been a whole lot better at running an organization with a whole bunch of people. I mean, we're over 200 people now, and it's fascinating and awesome, but it's like I hate standing up in front of people. In our company meetings, like, I rarely say anything. I sit in the back of the room, and I might have a comment every once in a while, but so that's always been my style. Is I'm the chief engineer, and just working in and on the products, and I go to all the board meetings and all that stuff, and I play a part in it. But I've had Mike Saturnia, who's been with us for 5 or 6 years now, came on as the chief marketing officer, and he's just naturally runs the organization and knows how to run a business and how to run it in a department structure. And so over time, he kind of took on more and more responsibility. And ultimately, it's funny, he became the CEO last year, and really for 2 reasons. One, because that was the job he was doing, and that's he's like, okay, let's call you the CEO now. But as we grew and added people, people didn't want to talk to me about engineering stuff because I was the CEO. And so it's like, I can't be the CEO anymore.
Right.
I want to write code, and the new guys don't know me well enough to know that they can ask me code questions or talk to me about, the hardware. And so a lot of it was like, let's make it clear that I'm not the CEO. Mike's the CEO. Mike's running the business. I'm going to help you guys build the products. And it's worked to a large extent. People still are new people have to get used to being comfortable with me, that I'm the big boss, but I'm not really the big boss. I'm sitting with them and I'm doing the product work, which is the fun part anyway.
I think that's just a really interesting aspect of you, Chip, because there's a bit of a contradictory there, where you're obviously a competitive person, and at the same time, the release of ego to step back and not run the company that you founded is quite at odds with each other. Do you ever find yourself disagreeing with the way the business is run, and you have input on that, or you just hands off?
Well, in a lot of ways, I think the success of the business is the products we choose to make, and that's generally been my, I mean, we have a lot of discussions about it, but it's pretty much what we've launched is mostly what I want to launch, and that hasn't changed. And because we've had success with each of the different categories we've gone into, are the investors we brought in are fully on board with letting me do that. So to the extent that we decide to, how to go into Australia or how to do, like, those are things that are better left to people that are good at distribution models and sales forecasts. So I rarely, I love to understand what's going on and be involved, but I rarely make many of those decisions or even get involved in them. On the other hand, we get into tons of knockdown dragouts over product features and product cost and what should we do and what shouldn't we do. And because one of the coolest things about Wahoo is most of our employees are cyclists and runners and endurance athletes, and that's been a big part of our culture. Is people that work here are customers, and that makes it so that we all fight about what it should do and how it should do it. So that's probably where we have more arguments is can we put this feature in or not? Can we get it done on time or not? That sort of thing.
Now, it seems that most of your history has been about, I can do this. I've got an idea and I can make this better. And then you've set out to, or you've almost by force, you've been forced to go and make a better computer, a better indoor trainer. And now you've started acquiring companies like the Sufferfest and Speedplay. Has there been a bit of a change of philosophy, or what drives those business decisions outside of, or rather than making a better pedal, for example, or a better training platform? Why have you decided to acquire? There
are different reasons in each case. Speedplay, I'm a mechanical engineer, right? I love the mechanics of a bike, and I'm always, I can't tell you how many times I've tried to make a new transmission. I shouldn't say that out loud, but we're not building a new. Chains are stupid. Why do we have a chain on a bike? But looking at pedals, I always was thinking I could build a better pedal. And when I looked at Speedplay, I found the better pedal. It's brilliant. Yeah, Richard did a fantastic job with that pedal. And so I met Richard a few years ago, and we struck up. We hit it off right away. A lot in common. He showed me he made the first turbo trainer. I don't know if you know Richard from Speedplay. In Europe,
I know of them. Yeah,
it's a turbo. That's what they call it. Like, I can't get them to call a kicker. They call it a turbo. Well, that was his brand. He made the turbo trainer before he did Speedplay. Right. So a lot in common. A really neat guy. Right? But he was reaching an age where he was ready to retire. And when I looked at the Speedplay pedals, I loved a lot about them, but I also found a lot of things that could be improved. And ultimately, it seemed like a great opportunity. That business is fantastic, but it really hasn't been run in a terribly professional manner. Like, you can't buy them in a lot of parts of Europe, so they didn't have good distribution. They didn't really tell the story of why they were better. It's a lighter pedal, it's double-sided, you can adjust the float, like everything about it is. I went and checked the list of what do you want in a pedal. They've got it, but they didn't really tell the story. Right. And so it's a bit of seeing an opportunity and saying we can take this brand and with Wahoo's help make it way more than it's ever been. And so that's the vision behind that. And we had the capital to go do something like that, so we did. And I think you'll sometime soon you'll see some really cool things come out of that. That's where I've been spending a ton of time, and it's a blast. So it's really getting to play pedal business now. It's a lot of opportunity, and the software side with Sufferfest is exact opposite. I was at Interbike a couple years ago, and I just had somebody set up a meeting between David McQuillan, and we hit it off right away and just think the same. The the cultures of the companies are the same, and we've been trying to figure out how to participate in. We've never had our own software, but in a lot of ways, we buy a kicker and send people off to try other software, and absolutely love what David's done, and so we were able to work out a deal where we acquired Sufferfest. We're not trying to be everything to every person, but they've got a fantastic platform that we can bring consumers to, and so uh, it's been awesome to bring them into the fold. And you don't think of Wahoo as a software company, but we already had like 60 or 70 software guys. So so now the team's working together, and yeah, it's really really fun to see. And having all our brand ambassadors meet with their brand ambassadors, and the weekly the little rides we're doing that are just awesome. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, they bring a great community, and I know David is great, as you say. It feels a little bit at odds with the kicker being an open platform to work with any software, and I can only imagine Zwift was a big part of your success. How do you balance that tightrope with all these different platforms, and then owning I wouldn't say a competing platform, but maybe competing for wallet share, and having the Sufferfest, meanwhile, also with Zwift and all the rest. How do you balance that tightrope?
I don't know that it has to be balanced. I mean, there's the biggest challenge that I've had is we'll introduce new things in the hardware, and they're super important to me and us, but they're not super important to Zwift. And so when we put a climb out, we've got all kinds of cool things it'll do. Well, I've got to go sell them on the idea of making the climb integrate with Zwift, or make it so that the climb just works and they don't have to do anything. And so being able to have a tighter integration, I think, will allow us to do really cool things, and they'll be more natural. And if anything, it'll just push the other software guys to adopt it, for our newer hardware products quicker, because we'll have the best experience because we're taking advantage of the hardware capabilities. So in a lot of ways, it just lets be closer. I think there's what do you do on Zwift and what do you do with Sufferfest? You train. We're trying to make people faster, help them train with Zwift. People are racing, having more social. Again, it's everyone's got their own idea of what they want to do and what they want to use, and there's a place for everything. So, we don't want to try to get everyone to come be Sufferlandrians, or everyone to be part of that. But certainly it helps that we think we can do a good job, and hopefully make some of our consumers have a kind of end-to-end experience between all the different products of our ecosystem.
Yeah. And I think it helps that David and the Sufferfest crew did a great job at not positioning themselves as a competitor to Zwift. They complement it very well, and that must help hugely. With I think it's safe to say that you guys, the Sufferfest, Zwift, really put indoor training into orbit, and were a massive part into making it the immersive experience and entertaining experience as it is now. But that also attracts competitors, and Zwift has job postings on hardware. How does that keep you awake at night with the competitors starting to emerge?
No, I don't think so. We've got. I think we'll stay ahead. We're constantly innovating. We've been at it for a long time. We've still got lots of ideas coming. The indoor bikes are just starting. I think we've got a 2 or 3 year head start on everybody with the bikes. It's inevitable. It's the grass is always greener, right? Zwift is got all their online people, and they're looking and saying, hey, we should be in hardware. Peloton's in hardware. It's hard to have a business that does everything. That's why Sufferfest is more of an adjacent to us. It's a way for us to give our customers a really good experience, but we're not trying to be the end all be all. And I really believe Zwift is in the same camp. They're not going to make a product that they're going to try to be. They'll try to close that ecosystem. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Eric would say, yeah, we're going to build the perfect bike and the perfect trainer. And if you want to use Zwift, you'll have to buy a Zwift trainer. But But I think in their mind, it's something that they can't afford to not do because they see the success of companies like Peloton and they're chasing that. It's not easy. Hardware's hard.
Mm,
Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think there's room for all of us. The number of people riding indoors has grown exponentially, but it's still a small portion of all the riders out there. So there's still room for more.
yeah. You seem to really want to tackle the immersiveness of indoor training and try to get everything. You've done a really good job at getting everything together. And maybe the last, or maybe the holy grail step to that is virtual reality. With the way virtual reality is right now, it's probably not practical. Is that something you could ever see yourself taking on, or are you just going to leave that to Facebook and Oculus? Is that just too big?
I've been, yeah, I'm a tech nerd, so I've been an early adopter of all of them. I had the HTC Vive, Oculus Rift. It's all, I mean, you should see them. Yeah, I can take you on a tour of my basement. I've got the surround screens. I love virtual reality. It's just the current hardware implementation and experience is just so restricting. It's not ready for exercise.
Yeah.
I, I I'd love to.
Just ahead of its time at the
It
moment.
really is. It really is. The capabilities are incredible, and who knows? This current COVID-19 thing may drive people to have more of these
Yeah.
immersive experiences will be driven to become more popular. But yeah, it's. I mean, Zwift has done some demos I've ridden, and it's a surreal experience to sit on a bike and be pedaling and look down and see legs that are going that aren't yours. Like I'll never forget the first time I
Yeah.
did that. I was like, oh, that's like these little
I
skinny
know. I
legs.
almost fell
Yeah,
off.
it is. It's hard to get. It just has to be perfect, and it's hard with sweating and everything else. I would love to
Yeah.
see virtual reality work, but I think it's got several more years of being a novelty before it really takes off.
Yeah.
And I can't really describe why, because I mean, I can hook you up to the Oculus and some amazing experiences, but it just hasn't caught on. It's a little bit there's too much hardware, too much setup, I think, to make it natural.
Yeah, well, I mean, man, 25 years ago when I was going into university, we were talking about it being a few years away, and it's been a lifetime. It's been a whole generation away. So, yeah, it is a new frontier, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm curious, is there any times you thought that this could fail, like the whole journey through Wahoo Fitness? Have you ever been on the edge of thinking, wow, this might not work, the company might not work, or has it been quite a steady trajectory for you?
Um, it's, I mean, we've been profitable every year but one. So that part has been steady. But we've had so much growth that I mean, I'd say we've taken lots of risks along the way. Not many companies would go into new
Mm,
categories every couple of years, and kind of reinvent ourselves. So there's been lots of periods where we took a big gamble to do something that knock on wood's paid off in almost all cases so far. And we've had our misses on products,
yeah,
but it's been generally good. And I've always had the kind of as an entrepreneur, I look at the businesses. I've got to have enough capital, enough cash that we can afford to make mistakes. And sometimes that means
yeah,
taking a bigger loan than you really need, or you're bringing in a little outside capital when you can get away without it. So it's bootstrapping, but in a way that allows you to be aggressive as an entrepreneurial company and grow as
yeah,
fast as you can. So with that approach, kind of once a year, we'd look and say, okay, if everything goes right, we're gonna have to buy this much stuff. We're gonna need this much cash. But if we do that, and then the shit hits the fan, we're gonna be out, and we're gonna be out of money, and blah blah blah. So we kind of need to have this cash pile in order to go for this amount this year.
mm,
And so it's kind of an exercise that used to be just done in a quick format, kind of almost back of the envelope by me, and now is done in a really crazy cool budgeting process that kind of does that. We've got,
yeah,
here's what we think our sales will be, here's what they could be, here's what we'll order, here's what happens if they don't go where we think they will. So long-winded answer of, I never really lost sleep over, are we going to be around? It never got that crazy, but we definitely pushed the envelope a lot.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of crazy to think that we've become, like it's a real business. It's not a startup. It's not a small business. We're like a real business. So hard to imagine now.
Could you have ever believed you'd be where you are right now 20 years ago or whenever you first started? Is this a dream come true for you?
It is. In a lot of ways, I'm like on the sidelines just looking in, like, I can't believe we've got, like our office is like 30,000 square feet that we've got everybody in, and it's full. And we had a company meeting this morning, and I'm looking in Zoom, and down in the bottom, there's like 185 people. And I'm like, oh my God, there's too many people all on our company meeting. So it's really fast. I love it. It's something I'm really proud of. But yeah, no, I never thought that. I mean, I remember in the early days when I was looking at those businesses to buy, like $1 million in revenue was that was huge. Had anybody ever do that? And now it's like we're significantly more than that. So it's crazy.
Yeah. And has there ever been a point where you've said, I've made it, I've done what I've set out to do, or do you ever look in the rearview mirror?
No, there's still more to do. Like, if anything, I'm starting to think, crap, I'm 50 years old. I wish I was younger. I'm going to run out of time. There's still so many things left.
Really?
Yeah. There's, I just love creating and products and categories. And, I think the road ahead is fantastic, and fun. So I'm having more fun now than ever, because like I'm really getting to do without restraint all the products I want to do and all the things I want to do. So it's a blast.
Man, that's so good to hear. Last question. I don't always ask this, but I think it might apply in this case. I'm always interested in the answer. How much do you attribute your journey and success to luck, hard work, and smarts? I know you got the smarts down, and you're obviously a hard worker. How do you partition those and, to attribute success to?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think it's, I don't think those are all important, but I think, if I had to look at what success takes, it's a little bit of all that, but then it's actually trying. I think so many people just don't take that first step. And that's the thing. I attribute that to my wife. I was, when I moved to Atlanta, she said, you're going to find a business. And I actually had a job offer. I was going and doing interviews because I was on the side. So I think it's just trying is a lot of the, it's not the idea, it wasn't because it was the kicker was the greatest thing ever. It helps to have the right product and the right timing, and that can certainly cause extraordinary success in some cases. But I think if you try hard and you're smart about it, and you work hard and you actually go for it, there's a lot of different ways to be successful.
I'm Wade Wallace, and thanks for listening to another episode of Overnight Success. If you have suggestions on a remarkable entrepreneurial story within the cycling industry, hit me up on our members Discord channel, where I'd love to hear about it. Until next time, stay inspired and stay tuned for our next episode.